Welcome to Psyche Talks. Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into the intricate dance of negotiation. It's a skill that honestly influences pretty much every part of our lives, right?
Absolutely. From those, huge business deals you read about down to just figuring things out at home.
Exactly. And we've pulled together a really fascinating collection of sources for you. Personal stories, practical strategies, some really deep insights, all focused on mastering this art.
Mhm.
Our mission here for this deep dive is basically to distill the most useful nuggets from all this, to help you maybe turn some of that negotiation anxiety into confidence.
And conflict into collaboration, ideally.
Right. We want to explore not just the how-to, but really the why it matters. We found some surprising facts, some really actionable strategies that hopefully can empower you to get better outcomes, wherever you negotiate.
Sounds good.
So, to kick us off, how much of a negotiation do you think really hinges on understanding emotions? It feels like it's way more than just logic sometimes.
Oh, it's far more than just logic. I mean, what's really fascinating here is that emotional intelligence, it isn't just about, being nice.
Yeah.
It's almost this hidden lever.
A lever.
Yeah, that can flip a negotiation that seems totally stuck into a real breakthrough
Mm-hmm.
because it lets you anticipate things, maybe even disarm potential issues.
Okay.
We looked at one account focusing on someone called Jessica in University Group Project.
Hmm.
Apparently, she had this uncanny ability to just read the room,
Intuitively.
sort of. During this really heated debate, voices rising, ideas getting shot down, Jessica just stayed calm, paused, and acknowledged the tension.
What did she say?
Something simple like, I can sense this topic is really important to all of us, but hey, we need to remember we're on the same team.
Wow. Just naming it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That simple act, just naming the emotions out loud, it apparently diffused the whole situation almost instantly.
That's powerful.
We saw it again when their presentation day got moved up suddenly.
Yeah.
One teammate, Sarah, just started spiraling, totally despairing.
Understand.
Right. But Jessica didn't just dismiss her fears. She went over and said something like, look, I know this change feels overwhelming. Let's just break it down together.
So validation again.
Validation and offering support. It wasn't just about strategy for the team. It was about building real human connections, fostering resilience, helping people collaborate, even when things are stressful.
It really shows that EI is as much about understanding yourself as understanding others.
Precisely. Grasping the emotions around you
Yeah.
and then using that understanding constructively to move forward.
That's incredible how just acknowledging feelings can shift everything. It really brings home the human element. But I wonder, is there maybe a risk of overdoing it, like getting bogged down in emotions, especially when the stakes are high?
That's a really good question.
How do you balance being sensitive with, actually making progress?
I think the trick is to acknowledge in order to validate, but not necessarily to dwell on it.
Right.
You let the other person feel heard, and paradoxically, that often frees them up to think more rationally, actually.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that leads us perfectly into building personal confidence. Because let's face it, feeling nervous before a big conversation, that's pretty universal.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The material we looked at makes a really compelling case that anxiety, if you understand it and harness it right, can actually be flipped. It can become a catalyst for confidence.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we flip that switch? What are the sort of practical steps our sources talk about for taming that pre-negotiation jitteriness and turning it into assurance?
Okay, so the strategies for building confidence before the conversation. These are like total game changers.
Right.
First up, there's visualization. And this isn't just, daydreaming. It's actively picturing every detail.
Like what?
Seeing yourself speaking confidently, picturing the audience engaged, even thinking through potential tricky questions and how you'll nail the answers. It's mental rehearsal.
Ah, okay. Like practicing in your head.
Exactly. Kind of rewires your brain for success before you even walk in the room. Then preparation is like your blueprint.
The details.
Yeah, logging your thoughts, really meticulously outlining arguments, gathering all your facts, crafting a narrative that flows well, rehearsing key points out loud. You start to feel like an architect of the conversation.
In control.
Right, not just a participant. We also saw the huge value of practice, like doing mock negotiations, maybe with a mentor or a friend.
Getting feedback.
Invaluable feedback. It helps smooth out your delivery, sure, but it also shines a light on your blind spots, things you wouldn't see yourself. And finally, positive self-talk. Sounds a bit cheesy maybe, but crafting affirmations like, I am prepared, I am capable, I deserve to be heard.
It works.
It acts like a mental shield against self-doubt. It really helps transform that nervous energy into feeling self-assured. It's a whole package,
Hmm.
building from the inside out.
It really does sound like preparing your mind just as much as your material.
Okay, so once you've got that internal game sorted and you can kind of read the room, the next big step is the groundwork, right?
Hmm.
The research. How much does that really change things at the table? Oh, it's transformative.
Oh,
Utterly. One account we looked at shared this story of a first job offer negotiation. The person basically went on a relentless quest for knowledge,
what did that involve?
diving deep. Industry reports, articles, salary benchmarks, even digging through LinkedIn for company culture clues, employee testimonials, everything.
Wow, thorough.
And the feeling they described was being transformed into a well-informed contender, equipped with data. It wasn't just about having numbers.
No.
It was about having the understanding to present a clear rationale behind what I believe was a more equitable offer. Research isn't just collecting facts, it's about framing.
Framing.
Yeah, crafting a narrative where your solution becomes their ideal outcome, even if it wasn't where they started. Data becomes like your co-author in that story.
I like that. Data as co-author.
It unlocks a much deeper understanding of the whole negotiation landscape. You know, when to push a bit more, and crucially, when to just listen. Citing something concrete, like a report on a talent shortage. That shifts the whole dynamic from feelings to facts.
Right, it grounds the conversation. So it's not just what you know, but how you weave it into that compelling story. Okay, and speaking of weaving things together, how do we move beyond the surface? Yes, beyond just the numbers to really grasp what's motivating the other side, their deeper needs.
Yeah, this is such a critical distinction. Understanding interests versus positions.
Okay.
We looked at this scenario involving someone named Sarah and a colleague. They were clashing over project approaches, one very traditional, the other quite innovative. Total deadlock.
Right?
The core insight, which came from a negotiation workshop apparently, was this. Positions are what you say you want. Interests are why you want it.
Ah, the why behind the what.
Exactly. So the narrator decided to dig deeper into Sarah's why. Asked her straight up, what's really driving your approach here?
Hmm.
Turns out Sarah's push for the innovative approach wasn't just about being new. It was driven by this deep desire for impact,
Hmm.
for reaching a much broader audience.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then the narrator realized their own resistance wasn't just about sticking to tradition. It came from a fundamental need for reliability and established credibility.
So different underlying needs.
Totally different. But once they saw that, they could start blending the perspectives. How can we safeguard integrity and expand our reach? It shifted everything.
From a fight to a puzzle.
Exactly. Even vulnerability came into play. Sarah admitted she was afraid of pushing too hard. The narrator was worried about criticism. Those fears became like a lens to navigate, turning it from adversarial to truly collaborative. Uncovering those interests, the why, just opens up so many more solutions than fighting over one fixed position. You're treating the root cause, not just the symptom.
That's a massive shift, seeing an opponent become a potential partner.
Yeah.
And this idea of blending perspectives, looking for that common ground, it leads straight into the idea of win-win. How does that actually work in practice? Especially when people seem to want completely opposite things.
We saw a really lovely illustration of this. It was a community project with a neighbor named Tom. They had totally conflicting visions for a shared space. Tom wanted bright, flashy flower beds. The narrator wanted low-maintenance greenery.
Yeah.
Seemed incompatible.
Yeah, sounds tricky.
But they shared an underlying goal, making our neighborhood more beautiful. The breakthrough came when they stopped debating flowers versus shrubs,
And focused on the goal.
focused on the shared goals, make our surroundings inviting, create a shared space, draw people outdoors. They even actively invited other neighbors for input.
Ah, bringing more people in.
Yeah, discovering the beauty of co-creation, as they put it. And this idea for a community garden emerged. It brilliantly merged both visions flowers bordering the space, but a central plot for herbs and vegetables.
Best of both worlds.
Exactly. They even reimagined their roles. Tom took charge of the flowers. The narrator coordinated the sustainable low-maintenance parts. And even when one critical neighbor objected later,
What did they do?
they deliberately stepped back, really listened to the concerns, and then re-engaged, focusing on the collaborative spirit. It just shows that compromise isn't about one side losing. It's about innovating together to find a better solution for everyone.
Okay, so moving from all that preparation into the actual interaction, the little things, the communication subtleties, They can really make or break a deal, can't they? We often focus on our words, but what about nonverbal cues, that quiet stuff?
It's surprisingly powerful, yeah. One reflection we read really highlighted building rapport with body language. Someone mentioned a past mistake they made, always sitting with crossed arms.
Which looks defensive?
Totally signals defensiveness or being closed off. Versus making a conscious effort to lean in slightly, maintain open posture, nod softly when listening.
Small things.
Tiny things. An open posture, maybe mirroring the other person subtly, a soft nod. These cues signal you're engaged, you're building trust, often before you've even said much. It sets a collaborative tone right away. It's those little things that build connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of connection, it's not just what you project nonverbally, but what you receive, what you hear. I've definitely been guilty in the past of just, waiting for my turn to speak instead of really listening. How crucial is genuinely hearing the other person?
Active listening is paramount.
Mm.
And honestly, it's much harder than it sounds.
It really is.
One person shared a story about a past negotiation failure that was largely down to just not listening. They were so focused on their own agenda, their own script.
Right.
They learned from a friend, Mark, who taught them techniques like summarizing back what you hear. Okay, so what you're saying is, and asking clarifying open-ended questions, not yes-no questions.
Probing deeper.
Exactly. Mark had his own story with a really difficult client. Instead of just pushing his solution, he started asking these deeper why questions. And it uncovered all these buried concerns that the client hadn't even mentioned.
Yeah.
So understanding isn't just processing words. It's about empathizing, really engaging with where they're coming from. The real challenge often is that vulnerability, accepting another's perspective without your own filters and preconceptions getting in the way, especially when the stakes feel high.
So it's not just being polite, it's psychological.
Definitely. It taps into that principle of validation. When people feel truly heard, their defenses just naturally lower. It makes them way more open to finding solutions together.
That makes perfect sense. People need to feel understood. But, okay, beyond just listening well, how do we adapt our own approach when we're dealing with different personalities at the table? You might have someone super direct and someone else who's much more indirect.
Yeah, understanding different communication styles is so important. Our sources gave this great contrast. There was Elena, described as a whirlwind of directness.
Haha, I think I know the type.
Right, versus the narrator, who was naturally more laid back, maybe more consensus-seeking. Initially, Elena's directness felt, well, jarring.
A bit aggressive.
Potentially. But over time, the narrator learned to actually appreciate her clarity. It wasn't about steamrolling. It was just efficient communication for her. So they adapted their strategies, learned to read her cues, phrasing, body language, tone.
So flexing your style.
Exactly. Recognizing that not everyone communicates the same way, and that's okay.
Hmm.
There was this moment during a budget decision where the narrator felt torn between trying to harmonize the team and needing to assert their own view. It highlights that ongoing challenge, how to be clear and decisive when needed, but still gentle and inclusive in a diverse team.
It's a balancing act. Okay, so you're listening, you're adapting your style. How do you then craft your message so it actually lands, so it cuts through the noise and persuades effectively?
Right, crafting your message is where it all pulls together. In one example, a vendor negotiation, the strategy was all about structuring thoughts clearly, prioritizing the key things: quality, timely communication, overall value.
Being organized.
And being precise. Using clear language. For instance, stating plainly, delivering ahead of schedule is really important to us. Not beating around the bush.
Direct, but polite.
Exactly. And the delivery was just as crucial. Using an open tone, making sure body language matched the intention, really trying to foster a sense of partnership, not opposition.
Okay.
When price became a sticking point, they didn't just haggle harder, they pivoted. They shifted the focus from just the budget line to the broader partnership benefits.
Like what?
Saying something like, look, by working together closely, we can ensure our brand values align, which benefits both of us in the long run. It reframed the whole conversation.
Ah, moving beyond just the cost.
Precisely.
Mm.
The dialogue became, as they put it, more than mere negotiation. It felt like a dance, making the vendor feel understood and valued, exploring alternative solutions together. It's about seeing that bigger picture.
Seeing the relationship, not just the transaction. That makes sense. And that leads quite naturally into the whole give and take aspect, doesn't it? What about the power of reciprocity? That feels like a bit of a psychological shortcut sometimes.
It absolutely is a powerful one. The power of reciprocity is like a cornerstone of effective negotiation.
How so?
In another negotiation, this time with a software vendor, the explicit goal was to establish a cooperative atmosphere right from the start.
Setting the tone.
Yeah. And they did this by leading with generosity, acknowledging the value of the vendor's software, expressing genuine appreciation for the effort they'd put in, kind of making the first move.
Softening them up.
Not quite softening up, more like building goodwill. They also shared some of their own insights and challenges, creating this intricate tapestry of trust, as the source described it.
So being a bit vulnerable first.
Exactly. Which then encouraged the vendor to reciprocate, sharing their own insights. It's not just tit for tat. It taps into this really deep human bias. When someone does something nice for us or makes a concession, we feel this natural urge to return the favor.
The principle of fairness.
Right. So strategically offering value or making a small concession first can subtly shift the dynamic your way, creating this positive cycle of give and take. The outcome in that case
Yeah.
is true win-win. They agreed on price, yes, but also secured ongoing support and training, building a really supportive long-term relationship. It went way beyond just signing the contract.
That's a great example. But, even with all these strategies, emotions can just flare up. We're humans. Sometimes those emotional triggers get hit. How do we navigate that, especially if the other person is getting really passionate or upset?
Yeah, it's such a common scenario. Our sources highlighted this with a negotiation involving a business partner Rachel described as really passionate, fiercely protective of her ideas.
Mhm.
The key insight wasn't just about managing Rachel's emotions, but recognizing one's own triggers first and actively choosing to ground yourself in that moment.
Ground yourself how?
Like mentally stepping back, just observing the situation without reacting immediately, consciously lowering your own defenses. Then acknowledging Rachel's feelings with phrases like, okay, I can see this is a really important point for both of us.
Does that work?
Apparently, it helped diffuse the tension because it made her feel heard. Validation again. But the narrator also shared a misstep.
Oh.
They suggested, maybe if we could look at these costs a bit differently. And that phrasing immediately triggered Rachel. She shot back. It sounds like you just don't see the value in this.
Ouch. Hit a nerve.
Totally. The crucial lesson was recalling emotional regulation in that instant. Don't fire back. Focus on your breathing. Maybe take a second to crystallize your thoughts before responding calmly. The big takeaway was that managing emotional triggers wasn't just a personal battle, it was a shared responsibility, which ultimately helped them both get to a better outcome together.
It really is a shared dance, like you said. But, okay, what about when the stakes are super high? That heart-pounding, high-pressure moment hits. How do you possibly stay calm and composed then?
Yeah, staying calm under pressure is maybe one of the hardest but most vital skills. One account detailed this critical deal snag with a supplier. They hit them with an impossible demand, and the person's heart just started racing, panic setting in.
Been there.
Right. But in that moment, they remembered advice from a mindfulness workshop. Breath first, then speak. Simple but powerful.
Just focusing on the breath.
Using specific breathing techniques to just calm the physical response, slow the heartbeat. The strategy also involved leaning into active listening again, really letting the supplier voice all their frustrations without interrupting, even if it felt unfair.
Letting them vent.
Exactly. And crucially, acknowledging their own internal feelings, the stress, the pressure, but consciously maintaining a positive, open, outward demeanor, trying to transform the challenge into an opportunity to find mutual benefit, even when feeling attacked. That composure in the middle of chaos, it's often what allows you to think clearly and find solutions when everyone else is panicking.
It's like being the calm eye of the storm. Okay, shifting slightly. Conflict is pretty much inevitable, right? Especially in personal relationships. But it doesn't have to be destructive. How can we resolve conflicts constructively, stop them spiraling?
The strategies for conflict resolution we looked at really emphasize finding those common objectives first.
The shared ground.
Yeah, there was this example of a sibling disagreement over household responsibilities.
Yeah.
Tension was high, sharp words were exchanged. Classic scenario.
Oh, yes.
But both ultimately wanted the same thing, a harmonious home environment. The breakthrough happened when they consciously shifted from, I need you to do X, to focusing on, we need our home to function smoothly.
Shifting the frame again.
Exactly. That opened the door to actually brainstorming solutions together, adjusting schedules, redistributing chores fairly. But crucially, they also had to address the emotional aspects, those past resentments that were simmering underneath.
Or baggage.
Right. They had to talk about it honestly, shedding light on the shadows, as the source put it.
Yeah.
And they discovered that the real crux of our conflict wasn't even the chores. It was an overlooked desire for recognition from both sides.
Yeah, feeling unappreciated.
Bingo. So they set up a simple system just to openly acknowledge each other's efforts weekly. That addressed the underlying need and transformed the dynamic. Conflict resolution, they learned, isn't usually a one-time fix. It's often an ongoing journey.
That's a really powerful lesson for any relationship, actually. But when we talk negotiation, especially in business, we have to touch on ethics. It can feel like a world that sometimes rewards aggressive, maybe even slightly shady tactics. Where do we draw the line? How do we navigate that?
Yeah, understanding ethical boundaries is absolutely crucial and tricky. Our sources brought up this classic college ethics class dilemma. Is it ever okay to break a promise for what seems like the greater good?
The tough question.
Right. The really compelling insight that came through was thinking of integrity as a currency worth preserving. Your reputation, your trustworthiness,
It has long-term value.
huge long-term value. Ethical boundaries act like these internal filters for your decisions. They help you align your choices with your true self, your core values. There was this great line, be the person your younger self would be proud of.
I like that. A moral compass.
Exactly. It serves as a guide, especially when you feel that tension between wanting success and maybe being tempted to cut corners or play it safe in a way that subtly chips away at your character. It reminds us that real sustainable success is almost always built on a foundation of trust.
So what's the tangible impact then? How does upholding that integrity actually affect your relationships day to day, personally and professionally?
Well, the impact of integrity on relationships is pretty profound, according to these accounts. In one story, someone had a friend, Sarah, who tended to rely on half-truths to smooth things over.
Avoiding conflict, maybe?
Probably. But the narrator decided to try radical honesty instead. Gently but firmly saying something like, Sarah, look, last time you suggested a sudden change like this, it caused some problems.
Risky. How did Sarah react?
With unexpected warmth, apparently.
Mm.
She acknowledged the concern, and their relationship actually leapt over another hurdle because of that honesty. Integrity became the glue fostering deeper trust.
Wow.
And in a workplace example, when colleagues were constantly slinging negative comments behind each other's backs, this person chose to be a rare voice of reason when speaking to their boss, Laura.
Not joining the gossip.
Right. Just sticking to facts, being fair. And Laura deeply appreciated that honesty. It strengthened the team dynamics, built trust with the boss. It just shows that sometimes the most effective long-term strategy is simply to be unequivocally genuine and trustworthy.
This all sounds great and very noble, but let's be real. Sometimes strategy feels like it's pushing one way and morality is pulling the other. Can they really coexist in the tough world of business, high stakes, deadlines?
That is the ultimate tightrope walk, isn't it? Balancing strategy with morality. We looked at the story of Marcus, a tech startup CEO, facing that classic dilemma. Prioritize short-term profit or stick to company values.
Oh, what did he do?
The source didn't detail his final choice, but used it to illustrate the conflict. The narrator also shared their own past regret, pushing an unready product just to meet a deadline, a decision that ultimately backfired.
Learning the hard way.
Exactly. The core idea that emerged is that strategy and morality might seem like polar opposites, but in truth, they can create a balanced harmony. It's not always either.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think of an entrepreneur who chose to invest in training local talent, even though it meant slower initial returns compared to outsourcing. Down the line, they built this incredibly loyal local customer base precisely because people respected those values.
So long-term strategy aligned with morality.
Exactly. It proves that sticking to principles can lead to unexpected, sustainable victories.
Yeah.
Practical ideas include consciously aligning business objectives with core values right from the start and maintaining transparent communication even when it's difficult. It was described beautifully as a dance of compromise where the music of morality was never entirely drowned out by the beat of profit.
A dance of compromise. I like that. Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's look ahead a bit. How is negotiation changing? What are the emerging trends we should be aware of to stay sharp?
Yeah, emerging trends and negotiation techniques are definitely shifting the landscape. Technology is a huge driver, obviously.
How so?
Well, think about it. Video calls, messaging apps, dedicated online negotiation platforms. But they've changed the logistics, sure, but also the dynamics of power.
Interesting. Power dynamics.
Yeah, things like perceived status based on a corner office are less relevant online. Pure expertise and communication skills, how clearly you present, how well you listen, they really come to the forefront. Your ability matters more than your physical presence sometimes.
Makes sense. What else?
Beyond tech, that theme of emotional intelligence is becoming even more critical. It's seen less as a soft skill and more as an essential strategy,
Why now more than ever?
because the purely transactional win-lose style of negotiation is proving less effective long-term. Active listening, empathy, they're crucial for uncovering those shared interests needed for sustainable agreements. And finally, we're seeing the rise of conscious capitalism.
Conscious capitalism.
Yeah, businesses focusing not just on shareholder profit, but on creating shared value for all stakeholders, employees, customers, communities, the environment. This broader perspective is increasingly influencing negotiation strategies, pushing towards more collaborative, values-driven, sustainable outcomes.
That's a really hopeful trend. So the landscape is evolving. What about us, our own personal growth and negotiation? How vital is it to just keep learning?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. Continuous learning and development is key. One reflection described feeling stuck, stagnant in a job, just going through the motions on autopilot.
We've all felt that.
Right. They decided to enroll in some online courses, really pushing past their fear and self-doubt. The materials also highlighted things we can all access, podcasts like this one, articles, books. They're all tools for continuous learning.
Keeping the saw sharp.
Exactly. And beyond formal learning, nurturing relationships, friends, family, mentors, colleagues, was emphasized as a lifeline, drawing strength, getting diverse perspectives. The journey involves accepting that life's this intertwined tapestry, where all your careful preparation inevitably meets the messy, unpredictable reality of actual human interaction. You have to keep adapting.
And finally, there's a really simple, maybe overlooked tool for that continuous growth, the power of just reflecting on our experiences.
Yes. Keeping a negotiation journal. This practice came up repeatedly as being hugely beneficial. One person described their early approach as chaotic, just relying on gut feeling.
Winging it.
Pretty much. Until a mentor suggested journaling after each significant negotiation. That journal quickly became this treasure trove of lessons learned and instincts honed. It turned raw experience into usable strategic insight.
What would you put in it?
Documenting the details, sure, but also your emotional responses during the negotiation. Looking for patterns. Like, I notice when I feel anxious, I tend to make concessions too quickly. Or when I felt confident and prepared, I held my ground more effectively.
Analyzing yourself.
Exactly. Dissecting that battlefield of human interaction, as one source called it. It becomes a tool for future growth, like a personal rehearsal space for your mind.
That's practical.
Incredibly. For one high-stakes, multi-million-dollar contract negotiation, the person reviewed their journal notes beforehand, things like stay grounded, anticipate objections, listen actively. Just reading those reminders provided a sense of calm and focus amidst the intense pressure. It teaches you how to evolve under pressure and, crucially, how to glean wisdom even from the most challenging encounters.
And that journal entry ended with a really provocative thought, didn't it?
It did. Something like, will I make it through to the other side, or has this negotiation masked more than just a simple contract waiting to be penned? Makes you think about the deeper currents, doesn't it?
It really does. Wow. What a journey we've been on today, exploring this whole art of negotiation. We've really seen well, it's an art form, but one that you absolutely can master with the right tools, the right mindset.
Definitely.
From understanding that foundational importance of emotional intelligence and really thorough preparation, to navigating those tricky interactions, handling pressure, and always keeping those ethical considerations in mind.
And maybe the final thought for you listening is this. The greatest outcomes, the truly win-win solutions, they often arise from a heart that's willing to genuinely connect with another person, no matter how different your starting points might seem. And always remember, that balance of power is almost always negotiable.
That's a fantastic note to end on. Thank you for your support and for listening.